Hello, hello, hello. This is episode 36 coming to you pre recorded from two very different locations between the states of Pennsylvania and Wisconsin. I am Brandon, transmitting to you remotely from the East Coast, and you are.
And and I'm Boom, somehow stuck in godforsaken Cincinnati.
Well, I don't think that's
Not really.
entirely accurate, but. So today is Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025, a long awaited day, I'd say, for you and I, because we're here to talk about a major presentation that happened this morning. One that I think has very positive opinions and some very negative opinions about it so far.
That's right. My first official TED Talk has happened.
Yeah, and it had some, people, I don't know. You said some things that I think people agreed with, some things that maybe people weren't so sure of. But that's just how it goes when you give any presentation, right?
Look, I stand by my statement. Sour cream and onion is the best chip.
And I'm in the group that's the hater on that. But in all seriousness, today, April 2nd, is the date where we got full details on the Switch 2. So I was up bright and early this morning watching it. I know you had to take it in a little bit after the fact. If you had to give your top line feelings, what'd you think?
So, I think the best thing to start off with right now on this one is the price. Now, something that I had kind of not realized recently, and I got to double check some of these numbers at some point, but the initial thing that I heard was the Switch itself, the Switch 2 itself is going to be about $450, give or take, like $449.99, I think is the retail price, if I
That
remember
is
right.
correct, yes.
However, I did hear games will be $90.
Yes, that's one of the major sticking points that we're going to talk about. I have complicated feelings on it, which I know is bad on the internet, but we have to look at things with this thing called nuance.
And I think something that was brought up recently, because I was kind of listening to some people initial thoughts as well, and someone actually brought up what I have never heard before when it comes to video game like pricing and stuff like that, is they actually took into account real world events that have been happening. So at the time of this recording, there are supposed to be new tariffs being placed potentially for a lot of different projects, or not projects, products, as well as across other countries. And unfortunately, Japan is one of those that's affected. Now, the big one that had been in the news recently was auto tariffs, but a lot of other products are also being impacted. So that is probably part of the problem with the price hike here. Um, I don't no, I'm not gonna sit here and point fingers at like, oh, everything's more expensive. Like, no, that's just what's happening currently right now in the world. Um,
And
but
it's
someone
been a
pointed
little bit of a
out,
longer term issue as well with all kinds of different products.
like last few months at least, if not more. But the issue has kind of gotten to a space that I had never really ever seen it be impacted before. Like, I mean, we've seen like the increase in some stuff where it was like, when Switch initially had Tears of the Kingdom come out, it was the first $70 game and people were raising eyebrows. Like,
Well, it
what
was the
was it last
first
year?
$70 Switch game because PS5 and Xbox Series X already hit the $70 threshold when they
Right,
released.
right, right. Sorry. As someone who still has not had a PS5 yet, I completely ignore a lot of that stuff to begin with. Since most of this time, anyway, anything I could get on PS5, I've been getting on Steam, but that's not the point here.
Right.
So, I think we were kind of on track to eventually be pushing the envelope a little bit when it came to prices. And I don't think actually it was in a situation where it was going to get that high. I would have probably looked at it and said, "Oh, we're at $75 or even $70," and I think a lot more people would have been a little bit more okay with that.
Well, right,
The
especially with a
issue,
couple years of PS5 and Series X at 70, I think people will be more accepting of that. I'll get into my whole thing on this soon. I want to let you finish your thoughts on it for sure.
yeah, I, from a price standpoint, am very shocked by a lot of it, but I can't say it's unexpected, just given the situation of a lot of different factors that applies to it. Like I knew it wasn't going to be $300 or anything like that, like the Switch was. It's like that was kind of expected. I think everyone can probably say like, yeah, it was probably going to be a little bit more. I would have assumed probably 400, 450 might be a little bit of a stretch. I do think that like 450 is okay enough that it doesn't deter me
I would have
as
really
much.
tried to target 400, but I agree. I think 450 isn't a complete deal breaker.
I do think that like a lot of the tariff situation is kind of impacting that price specifically. So I don't know if when I'm going to buy one. Like I know the release date has also been announced too, where they're going to be out June 5th of this summer. And I think that's actually really good. The problem's going to be is how many people at launch are going to have $450 right away, let alone putting into a problem situation where, we have. I don't want to say we have a few games because I don't think that's the case. I feel like they have more involved with this launch than they did with the initial Switch launch, which I think is a huge deal comparatively.
I'm glad you brought this up because I can't, I'm not sure exactly which phrasing you used, but something about that reminded me of a point that I'm going to make. So, do you have more comment, or are you ready for me to dive into my thoughts?
I'll finish up here in just a second. It's my thought process with a lot of it from the initial pricing standpoint is that I don't think 450 is bad. And what I was mentioning earlier is someone brought up for Japan, their pricing for it converted to US dollars would have been around 334 give or take.
Well, actually, I think it's interesting because I think what you're citing is I saw a report. There is an additional third SKU in Japan. So there's the version we're getting. There's the bundle with Mario Kart World, but Japan's also getting a cheaper bundle that's just the console. And I don't know why or how this affects the pricing. There must be something about this that I'm not quite understanding as to how it works. But there's a cheaper version that only includes Japanese as the language. And that version is going to be like $330.
Okay, I was not aware of that. I do think part of that pricing though is because it being essentially a internal price essentially since they're shipping to themselves and all these other places in Japan. Since Japan is the place that these are being made, I do think that's part of why it's cheaper. But I do think that part of said issue is that like the real world offense that we're sitting there thinking, oh, this isn't impacting us is now actually impacting us. You know what I mean?
Yeah, see, and that's still what I'm trying to understand with it, because it's called the Japanese language system. It's priced at 49,980 yen. That's about $334, give or take, versus the 69,980 yen, which is $647.5 for the multi-language equivalent. So,
Mm-hmm.
um, according to the article I read, the speculation is that that option's available because the yen is weak. So the amount of money that a single Japanese yen is worth is a lot less than an American dollar. So that makes it cheaper for people to purchase in Japan. And if you're not going to use the other language options, well, that makes way more sense to buy a version that's $130 less. I'm still not sure
Sure.
what the connection is between all the languages and the price, but it's interesting. Um, so I guess I'll go into my top line thoughts now, and we need to include some of the info here. So June 5th. So it's coming out in your birthday month, like you talked about. You won the bet on that one.
Literally, it's 2 days after my birthday.
Wow. Wow. Yeah,
I
I
could
can't
not have it more spoon fed.
really. I mean, yeah, if you're getting like birthday money for that, I mean, geez, you're set up right there. Um,
Mm,
$450 for just the system. Like I said, I would have tried really, really, really hard to target 400 because I agree. I think a price increase was on track, given that the original was 300 and the OLED was 350. But I think 450 is just it's a little bit more than I'd like to pay. Again, not a deal breaker. $500 includes Mario Kart World, and that's important because the price of the game, the MSRP on it is $79.99. Now, what we've seen, and I'm trying to get a harder confirmation on this for North America because we've seen this in Europe. The belief seemed, well, I mean, I shouldn't say the belief. The belief for North America is that this is going to follow what Europe and Japan are doing because they have it where these games digitally and physically have a $10 price differential. So it'd be $80 to
okay.
download, $90 to purchase the physical cartridge. So
I think I like that portion of it where it's like it's digital. It doesn't make sense to charge full price like
agreed.
a thing for that. That I'm fine with. Like
It's the
if
price
you can
itself.
do, yeah, it's. I would argue, and I may be in a very controversial viewpoint here, is I could have seen us with like $75, and I don't think it would have been as issue creating as what is currently out there with the information. I do think something that not a lot of people are talking about, besides like the real world implications of how this all went down,
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the issue became um, we need to kind of have this look at the trends of everything that were going on, and I think certain elements of it were escalated due to recent events, especially in the U.S. At least for our market. I can't speak for other markets across the country, or not country, across the world. Um, but I do think that like we were kind of in a situation that was going to, see that as, hey, we're going to probably have a bit of an increase compared to what you're used to. And like
Right.
that initial sticker shock is going to definitely be a turn off for some people. I think they're still going to sell plenty of units at day one. Um, but something I want to kind of bring up before I lose my complete train of thought is the Switch upgrades to games. And I
Yeah.
want
Yeah.
your
I'm
opinion
going
on
to
this
talk about
too.
that too. So, yeah, talk about
Yeah.
that first. We can circle back to my remaining thoughts on this.
Oh, we can start with you because I have some very specific thoughts on it, but I want to hear what you have to say on it
Okay.
first.
So with the prices, I think the things that we need to keep in mind with it. So I've seen the typical thing trotted out, which is true. I don't disagree with this take completely, which is like, we have to remember games in the 90s, okay, they could cost at least this much, if not more. I saw a post recently where someone was showing off, oh, like here's the price of um, Killer Instinct back in the day on the SNES. And that was give or take 89, $88 in um, the 90s. And here's like the problem I see. So like I see these similar things where it's like, oh, got all these upgrades, but the games are way too expensive. And people aren't putting it into context, and not fully. There are some places where people are putting it into context, and I think they're right. Some people where they're not. So, like a game that's 87.98 in 1995 in today's dollars is $184, right?
Jesus.
Okay, so like as much as I agree with the argument, people need to also remember they need to fully outline it, right? You do need to be illustrating, like, if you have Photoshop skills, you need to take that image and make another version and Photoshop onto it. This is what it would be today. That doesn't make the price of $90 good. right? I'm not saying people can't be upset with it, but we have to look at it in that context. It's not that game was not a $90 game. It was a $185 game in 1995. Okay. The other thing is so we have to look at all the content we're going to get here too, right? I'm looking at
Mm-hmm.
that Donkey Kong game. We don't have a confirmation on which team is developing it. Based on how it looks, I I think it's a very highly likely chance it's a lot of the same folks who did Super Mario Odyssey, right? It very much gives me
Mm-hmm.
that vibe. And, that's a game that encourages you to go for 100% on like how long to beat on that website. It lists a little more than 60 hours if you go for 100%, way shorter if you don't, but that's not really how you're supposed to play that game. If you're not playing it going for 100%, that's like your choice. um,
Mm-hmm.
and and it's a really good looking game. Like you're gonna get a lot of time and a lot of value out of it. Same thing for Mario Kart, right? I have 185 hours, I think the system lists, for my time with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So, like for me, I can pretty much guarantee I'm going to get that same amount of time out of Mario Kart World because I enjoy
Mm-hmm.
Mario Kart. But that's not going to be everybody, right? So, I can totally understand like if you don't want to pay 80 or $90 for that because you don't play a ton of Mario Kart, that's a great reason to not buy the game. I don't begrudge someone that, but like for me, would I say I've gotten $60 in value, 85 if you include the booster course pass. Have I gotten that value out of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe? Absolutely. Probably a couple times over.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not going to be everybody. Another thing, so people are kind of citing a lot like, well, you don't see sales for these games as much. And I'm going to push back on that. I think that's true, but for one thing, sales are happening a lot more often than they were back in the day. People say like Nintendo games never go down in value. Well, that's true, but they also do go on sale periodically, and I agree the sales aren't as good as other ones, but it's also better valuing the game, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, the Mario Kart, like if you look at the original Mario Kart 8, that was $60 plus the $15 to get, you know, to get one and a half times the tracks and six characters and new car parts. You look at Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. You doubled your game for less than half the amount of value. So to me, in practice, if you're like, I'm the kind of person who would just get all that stuff anyway. So to me, the whole value of the game is the game plus all that, right? So I would rather have the game be priced upfront with all the stuff I'd really want out of it, and then get that amount of value. Now, if these games do get DLC, then we're talking a slightly different ball game too, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
let's see what else. So sales are coming up more often. Um, small points like I got Tears of the Kingdom over Black Friday weekend, and I got it from Walmart. Why did I get it from Walmart instead of another retailer over Black Friday? Because it was $40 everywhere else. I got it for $30 over Black Friday from there. A $70 game for $30. And even just recently, Super Mario RPG at a bunch of GameStops, $20 for that game. So like I'm just saying if you are patient, you can still find really, really good deals. It's not the same thing by any means. I understand is like, hey, this $70 game is randomly on sale for $10. Like I agree, that's not exactly the same thing, but it's a better, more accurate valuation for these games, right? You're not completely because if you what the devs are relying on and why they keep being in this vicious cycle then too of getting all the extra you have to buy all this extra stuff. You have to buy the season pass, you have to buy all the DLC to really feel like you're getting the full game is because they're waiting for the whales who want it at launch, who are definitely going to spend that whole price, and then to get anyone else interested it has to be that absolute dirt cheap price. And to be clear too, like, you know, as much as I'm saying like I don't think the sky is quite falling with these prices. As soon as we get a game that's like the Mario Golf Super Rush equivalent on the Switch 2, where it's priced for way more than what it's worth, okay, I will be out here and telling people that this is ridiculous, right? I will tell people they
Yeah.
probably should get it at launch. And that's the annoying thing here. Like if I had to really sum it up with the prices, is that both these things can be true at the same time. It can be true that this is still a way lower price than if you were to pay the equivalent of Killer Instinct 1995 to today. But it's still $90. And that's a lot of money. And I don't like, even I, as someone who like it doesn't super duper extremely regularly purchase games if they're not like relatively cheap, I don't feel comfortable paying $90 for every game, right? I do not feel comfortable with that. But I know there will be sales, and Nintendo does like to do the variety of prices thing too. You like Mario versus Donkey Kong last year is $50. I just got it for 30 on sale, right? So you're going to see that at least that little bit of difference in prices as well. But things are expensive right now, like you said. People are pointing out, like, well, I mean, that's true, but the cost of living was so much cheaper back then, so it'd be easier to spend money on luxury items. But it's like, well, for one thing, you just used the word luxury, right? This is a luxury item. You aren't supposed to buy these things all the time. And even then, if I agree with you that things were cheaper back then and you could spend a greater portion of your wealth on it, the problem here isn't inherently in the game prices. Like it's a piece of the puzzle, but kind of to your point on the tariffs and stuff too. Uh, this is like a lawmaker government type problem. We don't try to. I think we try to kind of steer clear of politics on here because of
And
the industry we're
before
in.
you
Okay, go ahead.
before you before you continue on, I want to preface heavily. It's like we are not making a political statement. We're just making observations of the current situation of what's going on at the time of this recording and giving our 2 cents on this. We are in no means like economic experts,
Nope.
political
Nope.
experts. We are just like, hey, we see these two things kind of correlating, so we want to talk about them because this is what we're talking about. And I think kind of to your point too is we're in such a weird situation pricing wise, and we've been so I was going to bring this up when you were done, but
We're used
we've
to
been
long price
so
to $60 forever.
yeah, exactly. And I think that is a huge thing that maybe like a lot of us, like I can't say everyone, but a lot of people out there are going to be very shocked when they don't see a 6 in that first thing until probably a sale price realistically. Like
Yeah.
a $90 game is expensive. Like I don't think there's anything inherently upsetting about that. Like
Mm-hmm.
but like what I'm shocked by is it's like $90 for a game to me is like, oh, we're getting a rare older game, something like that. Not like
Yeah.
a fresh brand new game. So my hope is that eventually there are going to be I won't say semi-frequent sales, but like sales that are going to at least help the cost of things. They are probably going to get plenty of whales still at day one because like
Mm-hmm.
especially in our industry like this, there are people that want to talk about the games first and all this stuff. There will be people at the door day one for Switch 2. And I think it's going to be a very weird balancing act because we're going to see all these people who are like they're gonna probably complain about it, they're gonna still pay for the full price because they don't want the FOMO to kick in.
Mm-hmm.
I should know when Pokemon Legends Arceus came out,
Yeah, you told the
i
story
had
recently.
I had such FOMO about it because I didn't want to wait for a physical copy, and it's one of the few digital games that I still own. And I'm mad because a week later is when it came back into stores, and it hasn't ever run out since. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I could have just waited a week, but that's my problem, and I don't, regret buying it when I did digitally. It still was a fun time. I think what I'm most concerned about overall is we're looking at the Switch 2 at that price right now, right?
The console or the
And
games or both?
the games, the console to a lesser degree, but more on the games. I think what I'm worried about is that it's kind of a double-edged sword
Mm-hmm.
on what happens with Nintendo. Because option A is you set it for $90 and people are going to do one of two things. Either people aren't going to buy it right away, which could hurt their bottom line and may skew sales numbers, I feel like. Because people are going to look at it and say, well, I'm going to wait until it's on sale. That's an understandable thing. I get it. As someone who is a frequent lover of Steam sales, I do the same thing. When $100 on Steam can get you like, 6, 7, 8 games, and that's
Mm-hmm.
including maybe an occasional big name release. But then you look at the Switch too, and it's like we're supposed to spend $90 on a singular
I
game.
do have a response to this, but continue.
Um, I think there's going to be a very, very big and vocal crowd that will be angry about that. And I I'm not gonna go this far and say that this is gonna be the Switch 2 is going to flop's
No,
reason.
no, I don't see that
I
happening.
don't think it's that. If anything, I think what's gonna happen is like they're gonna be a little bit smarter about it, but the new game sales may at the initial time they might take a hit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think that like it's going to also be another side effect of if people do buy those $90
Yep.
games, that's going to impact the entire market because now you've basically told Sony and Microsoft, hey, we sell these for $90, people still buy them.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to take suit too. So it may not happen on PS5 games. It probably will happen on the next Xbox. It'll probably happen on the PS6. And that's going to be a different problem
Yeah.
because now everybody is going to be at $90 instead of just Nintendo Switch too. So it's a real damned if you do, damned if you
Mm-hmm.
don't situation. And I think that's kind of what's going to hurt Nintendo to some degree. Not saying it will impact them drastically, but I think that initial reaction is going to see a slight dip in certain parts of the numbers until people are just kind of reluctant to be part of that whole thought process. You know what I mean?
Yes. No, these game prices aren't releasing the Wii U, right? This isn't that. What I wanted to respond to that with, though, is in that same generation, there was another system. I don't know if you remember this system. It was called the 3DS, right? Do you remember
Mm-hmm.
what that system launched, like what that launch price was for that system?
Was it like 250?
$250. You know what happened less than a year, if I recall correctly, into that system's lifespan? It was dropped
Enlighten me.
it was dropped to $170 because nobody was buying the thing for that much. So I am totally like, as much as I'm like trying to be like, the sky's not falling. This is how game prices go, and there's a lot of good reasons for this to be the case. If you are someone who is a holdout, just remember, it works, right?
Mm-hmm.
It worked with the 3DS, right? They can respond to that. So I do think it's the case that like if these games sell terribly, they will go down in value. Okay?
Right, and I think that's a situation of like kind of what I touched on and what you just touched on
Mm-hmm.
is Nintendo knows that prices are going to fluctuate, I'm sure. Like, the Switch, I think, was actually one of the most consistent consoles when it came to pricing. If you don't take into consideration, like, holiday sales and stuff like that, it was pretty consistently, I'd say, around 300-ish bucks.
Pretty much, yeah.
So, there is a okay spot for it. And I think the problem, kind of going into what you said, is I don't think the Switch 2 console is the thing that will go down. I think it will be the games that will go down first.
Yes.
Because I think what they're going to see is one of two things. Either people are going to try to buy digital, wait for sales like on the eShop and all that stuff for, the better pricing games and not have to, get a physical copy that will cost you more in the long run. And either again, another double-edged sword situation is they could just reduce the cost that a Switch 2 game physically will be. Because I think realistically, if it's $70 to $75, you're a little bit more inclined to be okay with that
Yeah.
versus the 89.99 for what it is. Like, you gotta really want that game day one
Right.
if you're gonna do it. And not everybody has $100 just laying around after a paycheck. It's like I think we're gonna see a very infrequent amount of game sales here and there, and I think that's really gonna suck. But what I'm also worried about is if, let's say that, people don't buy a lot of physical as games are starting to come out for the system this year, we could see Nintendo just dip away from physical altogether, which really would be a bad thing,
Mm-hmm.
at least from my perspective. We've talked about video game
Yeah.
preservation. I absolutely feel like you should still sell physically. I hate this market that we have right now of like, oh, digital is like kind of the more important one because it's like, oh, we're, skipping out on all this extra cost if we have to make them physically. It's like, and then it slowly becomes like this whole weird market now because it's like older games are now expensive. When we get like limited edition physical releases, they're astronomically large unless they're like at launch like $60 or whatever. Like, it's such a precedent because now we have kind of like, I don't want to say we've shot ourselves in the foot as consumers, but like the industry has such a hyper response to like all these things that are going on at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, I'm not saying this is Nintendo who does it because I don't think that they actually are ever really in that position a lot of the time with like certain trends and stuff like that. But like, there's a knee jerk reaction, I feel like, when it comes to like, oh, physical's not selling as much. We should just focus on digital. Or, oh, well, prices went up for this game, so maybe we should start using that as like the benchmark now. It's like, there's not really a healthy way to look at it if you're in the industry
Mm-hmm.
as like an executive or even like a developer or anyone below that, and feel confident that like whatever decision is made, someone is going to complain about it. And I will be the first to admit we have been definitely airing our grievances about this whole situation. I do think realistically though, what ends up happening with the Switch 2, whether it's at launch, 6 months, a year down the road, there will be questions about what it does to impact the industry as a whole moving forward. I think that is a fair statement. I don't think it's anything inherently wrong.
I don't think it's
I cannot.
alarmist.
I don't think. Yeah, I don't think it's alarmist either. I think it's just it's an eyebrow raiser right now because all this is happening very fast. Like in 2 months, we're getting the Switch 2, and then we're going to get all these like big first party titles to start off with, and I'll get more into this, but some of them look really good. I can't even argue it. Like, we're talking about a system that like I think overall was kind of in this it has the ability to kind of be on par with like a PS4, which is not by any means a bad system.
Oh yeah. I mean, when I saw the 4K 60 on the TV, if that's how you want it, or the 120 FPS like a PC, I was like, okay, they're meaning business here. So, like, to me, when I think about the technology in this little device, that's where I start to be more like, okay, I can see the 450, but I agree. It's really the games and the way that I was thinking about it as I was watching and I've been thinking about it throughout the day is what this is it's like I'm worried they're flying too close to the sun. You know, they're really trying to do the or kind of like I used like with the dolphin thing where it's like poke the bear. They're trying to see like how far can they get in the pricing. This is like the test case, right? We want to see how
Mm-hmm.
far we can go before okay, we tried this. We have to pull back the prices on the games. People aren't ready for this yet. So then they pare back the prices like they did with the 3DS system price. Okay, people won't buy this for $250. We get it. We're going to pull back the price, see what happens. All right, people are buying it. We found our sweet spot. Okay, I
Mm-hmm.
think I think one of two things is going to happen with the games like you said. It's either going to be people suck it up and that's what they buy them for, or they're going to find out, oh, geez, yeah, it looks bad that Mario Kart World is selling terribly when Mario Kart 8 Deluxe was the best selling Switch 1 game. So, okay, we got to step back. We got to pull back these game prices, and then we'll see the prices go up. Of course, they could also run into the situation where it's like the well has been tainted on these games in particular. And honestly, I think that might be the worst thing with the Mario Kart World prices. It's like, do you want the potential to where the situation could be the well has been tainted on this and people don't buy it even though it is a lower price? I don't think that one in particular would happen, but it's just something to think about, you know. Let's talk about, you brought up the Switch 2 edition games. I think that's an interesting idea. I'm kind of torn on it because like everything else we've talked about so far, it all comes down to price with that, I think.
Yeah, and I think something that is a thing that needs to be aware is I think this is allowing Nintendo to kind of have a do-over in some cases with some games. Because I put a note in there when I initially heard that announcement was, does this mean that it's fixing Scarlet and Violet? Because as someone who
It
enjoyed the
could.
actual gameplay, I think this is going to be a good attempt for people to like be able to play certain games now where it's like, yeah, we weren't able to really, have this work the way that we wanted to on the Switch. It could have been like you said, a little flying too close to the sun situation. It could have been a developmental crunch time situation. I don't know the specifics on that. That's not what I'm complaining about it on. Is that when it got to certain points in the game, the Switch chugs hard and it is frustrating because like there is a good game in there. I actually was watching recently. I've been really enjoying beat 'em ups recently, the YouTube
Mm-hmm.
channel, and he had done this tier list of like what he would view as the top 10 Switch games, and some of them were kind of a shock. Like some of them were expected, but like I think he ended up like in his final ranking, Pokemon Legend Arceus was like a top one. I think it was like his number 10 or something like that. And then Scarlet and Violet still he ranked an A. Now,
Okay.
now here's the thing is that he's taking into a very large array of reasonings for like what he picked as what. And he was very blunt about certain ones he didn't play either. So like they didn't get put on the listing. So for him, it's understandable. So something that I kind of was impressed by with like how it's analogy because he does complain quite a bit about Scarlet and Violet in the past in some of his older videos, and I definitely get it. Like I'm not saying by no means like I had a full or not what's the word I'm looking for. It's not that I didn't have fun with the game by any stretch, but like there's certain parts of the game from a just a technical standpoint that it's frustrating because it's like, you want to enjoy the game, but it's like if I'm hitting the run button and suddenly my game slogs to like, less than 30 frames a second or something like that, people are going to notice and people are going to have gripes. It's like that was why I think like a lot of initial ratings for the game when it came out were like 3 out of 10s or something like that. Like there is a good game in there. My hope is with the Switch 2 versions, this means that like we're going to actually fix these games to a certain degree that it's where it should have been in the first place. Now, if Scarlet and Violet particularly have a massive improvement, I'll buy that version. Like I'll buy the upgrade pack. I don't care.
Yep. And there are two
Um
games. There are two games I want to highlight because they're doing exactly that. And those are, and also there's an additional reason. And those two games are Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. That is exactly what their Switch 2 editions are, more or less. They've also got this Zelda notes thing. Okay, I don't know that that's really a big deal. Like it's neat and all, but it's not like
it's
earth
effectively an
shattering.
app that it's effectively an app that's just going to be essentially like here's a guide for you that if you need it.
Pretty much.
Like they're helping people, especially with those games, because they are massive collectathons. There's so much
Yeah.
to do in those games, and like for people who want to 100% complete the game, cool. I think that's a great thing for it. For me, I don't necessarily need to collect 100% of the
Yeah.
things. It's like as long as I beat the game at the start to finish and I've beaten what I'm supposed to do out of it initially, then I'm good. I don't feel like very few games have me feel like I need to
Hmm.
100% this game.
Right. So, case in point with these two, what does it cite on the website here for both games? Support for Zelda notes, improved frame rates and resolution, faster load times, HDR support. To me, aside from the Zelda notes being the unique thing, that sounds exactly like what you want for Pokemon Scarlet and Pokemon Violet. What I want to point
Mm-hmm.
out with them in particular, why I cited these first as opposed to the other games that are actually also getting new content, is those two are, because they didn't highlight this, I would have highlighted it in there just because people complain about this service all the time. Those two Switch 2 editions are free if you have the online expansion pack. So just like the
Mm.
Mario Kart 8 DLC, they're included, or like the Animal Crossing DLC, you get them if you have that. So if you don't want to spend the money on it, that might sweeten the deal for you for your online expansion pack. Now, again, like I said, the big thing with these to me comes down once again to price. On those two games in particular, I would hope they really, 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 really keep these super low. Because as neat as they are, you can also just play them on the Switch 2 without the upgrades, and it's like they'll be the same as you played them on Switch 1. And if you're fine with them that way, I don't like, I would just keep playing them like that if you think the price is too much. Whereas a game like Super Mario Party Jamboree, where it's actually getting new modes, or Kirby and the Forgotten Land, where it's getting more content, right?
Yeah.
Those are ones where I might say, like, okay, pay the extra money, but it all comes down to the price. So we don't have prices here in North America for it yet. I did see we have prices on the Japanese website. The prices for these editions on the Japanese website, the website, wow, I'm slurring my words here. Um, I think this was across the board. I'd want to double, triple check. I really should have before I got on here. But what I saw for a couple of them was 8,500 yen. That comes out to about $7. If I had to guess, that's going to probably be bumped up to $10 here.
I believe it'd probably be $20 here,
You
if I'm
think
being
20?
honest. Okay, well, think about it this way. It's for American pricing, I feel like when it comes to add-ons, $20 sounds kind of like that sweet spot that they have.
Yeah, but I just think they try to be very consistent with the prices between regions. Like if a
Well, I'm not
game Right.
disagreeing.
If a game is cheaper in another region, in one region is going to be cheaper here. So I would think if they're going to go for like $7, $8 in Japan, $10 seems like the sweet spot here. And to me, that's probably like the cap I would go for some of these. Like I can't, I, I don't know that I would go for $10 for an upgrade to Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. I would probably do $10 for Jamboree and $10 for Kirby, and even same, like I'm not gonna buy Metroid Prime 4 because I'm not interested in it, but like you're getting better resolution, better textures, load times. You're getting the two display modes in HDR between quality and 60 FPS and 4K, or 120 frames in 1080p. But the big thing that would make me be like, okay, I could maybe do a couple more dollars and like five for it is the mouse controls. Um, but yeah, just in general, these ones where it's just like graphical enhancements, $10 seems like a lot. If you're getting more content and it's basically like you're getting those upgrades plus a like more content, okay, now I'm a little more into that. So again, but we need to see like what do they decide to go on here? Because if they end up saying $5, I'd be like, okay, it sucks. It's still annoying, but I think, if you want that premium experience, like that's not a terrible deal. Really, the question on that too is going to be similar. Like, are these going to go on sale? Because we've seen some like instances where it's like, oh, the game's on sale, the DLC isn't. Why? Or like, oh, we have a bundle with the game and the DLC, and that's on sale, and the base game's on sale, but you can't buy any of the individual DLC on sale, like if you already bought the game. Like, what the heck? Like if I could get that and it's like regularly $10 and they have it on sale and it's $5, or it's regularly $5 and they have it on sale for $2.50, it's like okay, that
Hmm.
I'll pay $2.50 for increased frame rate, but we got to find out. All right, where should we go here, folks? This is one of the first episodes I think we've ever done where you have completely no notes between the two of us. Is there any what kind of things stuck out to you that you think we should comment on next?
Okay, so I want to touch base a little bit about like the Switch 2
The
itself with a
console?
couple of things. So I think one is like 1080p is great. The fact that it can get to 120 frames per second is pretty good. The Joy Cons being magnetized as a way to do it is nice.
Mm-hmm.
I think the bigger concern is going to be just so long as the Joy Cons don't have the same drift issue as they had previously.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was thinking about when I was watching it. Is that I was like, okay, when are they going to talk about the sticks? And they say, oh, they're bigger sticks. Are
That's
they
not
this
what we
other
want to
kind of
know.
stick? Like that's neat, but we really need to know if it's this other kind of stick because, like you said, that's the issue.
I think the thing that gets me the most about what we saw with the Joy-Cons was the mouse controls feature, which
That's
is
cool.
interesting from a gameplay standpoint. My concern is it's like how long will those last if I'm doing mouse controls? You know what I
That's a
mean?
great question. I was
Like,
wondering. Well, I saw. They include the good old straps on them that everyone loves and uses all the time, right? So what I
mm-hmm.
was thinking about with it was, okay, I would be worried. Well, because I'm looking at an image of it. I see the sensor is it is recessed into the controller. So so as long as it's not like rubbing up against your table surface, I think it would be fine. I do still I still wish they offered a mouse pad with it.
I was gonna say if a mouse pad will keep it safe, I think that's gonna be better for it in the long run. I could see them ending up with like this Switch 2 exclusive one because like maybe the sensor doesn't read as well on a mouse pad like typically. Not saying if it will or won't, but it's like it will only be found out probably once people actually get their hands on it and they
Mm-hmm.
try things with it. Like they're gonna test things out. I don't think that's too out there to say. Um, Other things that I wanted to mention too is like I love that it has more storage in
Thank
general, like right out
God,
of the
but I was
gate.
just like, God, could you just not have done at least 500 gigabytes? Like 256 is
Uh,
great, don't get me wrong, but I mean, like, just like, oh,
yeah, I will say though, and I'm gonna kind of jump ahead of what I was gonna say on this. The uh, specific SD cards that they need for those is a bit infuriating. I
mm-hmm.
get why they're doing it, but like as someone who owns like one of the 256 ones where I'm pretty sure is like the it's not the one that they specifically say like you need for extra storage. That kind of blows, which means that I
Yeah.
basically need to have that exclusively for my Switch now. Um, but no, I think it's better overall. I think that also means that we're gonna see games with much bigger um storage that it needs to take up on. Like I'm getting vibes from like, all right, I have to really figure out what my GameCube memory card is going to have on this the same way with these Switch 2 games now. You know what I mean?
Well, see, the thing that I saw, or at least the way that I took it, is it isn't even really so much about the space because they've offered for a long time 512 gigabyte cards. They've been offering a terabyte for a little while now. It's really about the transfer speed because that's
Mhm.
the big difference with the express cards is the transfer speeds. And I agree. I saw that. I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, that just seems really needless. I agree. But at the same time, like, if it's what the technology requires, because they're kind of to your point earlier, where it's like, or to like something you said earlier, where it's like, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. On the one
Yeah.
hand, they'd be damned if it's like, okay, well, we can use the same SD cards, but the load times are going to suck, or you're going to notice it compared to like, why is this game that's like, I have it downloaded on here going so much slower than a game that I have on a cartridge? Well, it's because you're using the old kind of SD card. But then now that they're doing it and they have the express SD cards, it's like everybody's going to have these uniform load times. They'll be happy with that. But now they have to upgrade and get brand new SD cards. And it's like, there's really no good solution here. So I'm still annoyed by
And
it, but it's just kind of what it is. It's one of those things where it's like the world of the should versus the world of what is, you know?
I was kind of gonna go into that a little bit too with additional costs. I'm gonna call it, but I want to finish what I was gonna say so I can get at least through the system stuff that I made notes on. I think the newsstand looks good.
Yep.
I think the fact that we're getting more USB-C ports is insanely smart because now I don't have the issue of, oh, I have to go put it on the dock because I can't charge it from the bottom, or if I put it on its back, it's going to overheat on the table, and God knows what'll happen there.
Agreed.
The new dock 4K support's good. The fact that it has vent cooling is nice, and then comparable Switch game support, like what we had kind of been talking about with the Switch 2 versions and having older games, that was the important thing. Like having that backward compatibility of I can play Switch 1 games on the Switch 2 is great because now as someone who owns how many Switch games, and I'm sure you're in the same boat on this one too, like it's going to save, I think, costs for some of these initial games. I think
Yep.
the big price hikes that we're seeing in some of those newer ones is going to more impact the games that it's like they're brand new. Like, yeah, they can be on Switch, but like this gives me more incentive to get the newer version out of the box.
Agreed. Um, did you want to talk about, since we're on the subject of hardware, uh, I'm sure there are some people it will appeal to. Well, actually, this is a very minor thing. Okay, they have 3D sound. Okay, cool. That seems to be the big thing. I don't really care. The bigger thing I want
Yeah,
to talk
I didn't
about,
have that on my notes
yeah,
there.
I'm just saying, I just want to cover a lot of the stuff that was in that, like, sizzle reel. God, they spent so much time on the C button in the game chat.
So I was actually going to go into that next,
I'm
ironically.
glad this worked out.
So I think the game chat thing is an interesting take, but I do feel like if you were really concerned about that, wouldn't you just want to just work with Discord to make sure that it works? Like that's my 2 cents on it. Is
Mm,
it's like Discord already existing. It's the popular one for people to do, but you've made now an entirely different program for people to use specifically on the Switch too. Which I mean, if it's built in, okay,
right.
sure.
It's an
And
improvement on the Switch Online app.
yeah, I do think the camera edition is a bit much. I don't know if you really need to have a face cam at your available like situation on the Switch 2 while you're playing it with friends.
On the
But maybe
TV
that's me.
stand. No, I completely agree.
This is my boomer era, I'm sorry. And I do think that the camera edition may be a little bit much, but that might just be me. I will say I do like what they announced was we're gonna have open access for the game chat uh for the first year so people can at least experience it before they actually have to pay for it.
Right.
That's smart.
Right, because they might decide, you know, for all we know, we could be haters right now, and then we get it and we try it out. It's like, okay, you know, this is cool. So I agree. I think that's nice. My big thing with it that we haven't cited here, aside from like, okay, the camera is dumb. Did this need a dedicated button on on the controllers? My other thing, mic wise, it's just the Wii Speak all over again. Because if you're playing this on the TV, that was the problem with the Wii Speak. The Wii Speak was above or below your TV. Now they say they have technology, so it's like, oh, it'll cancel out the noise of the game, it'll cancel out the noise of everything else going on in the room. For one thing, I'm definitely in wait and see mode on that because the Wii
Mm-hmm.
Speak had that exact problem. The other problem is it's halfway across the room. Like, I think this is only really viable in if you're playing in handheld mode, if you're going to use it. And I just
Yeah.
can't justify, like, why would you want that? If anything, if there's anything in the system that they showed off that has the word game in it that I liked better, it was the game sharing. I thought that was
Yeah.
like, I was like, oh my God, download plays back. if I were them, I would have hyped that up way more than the game chat. Like the game chat is cool, but it's like I think it's so much better to be like, oh, now if I wanted to play Super Mario 3D World in multiplayer, I can just share the game to these people online, and now we're all playing as if it was like as if they all had the game too. I think that's really neat. Um, Same thing for like Super Mario Party Jamboree. Oh, now I don't have to have everyone needs to have the game. If I just want to play with 3 people that I have on my friends list, a quick game of Mario Party. I think that's really neat. I really would like to see this come to more games. And I'm looking at the list here and I'm like, I'm trying to remember what kind of 4-player mode would have existed in Super Mario Odyssey. Maybe it's just 2-player, but like, I don't know. I thought that was neat.
Yeah, I think the sharing games thing is absolutely huge because for me, kind of going back to what we were talking about with pricing, that gives me a reason to be like, okay, now 4 people have access to this game. If one person just bites the bullet on the cost, like, okay, I can kind of get it a little bit. Now, I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do,
Mhm.
but I think like for me, like my sisters and I, we all have Switches. If we all get Switch 2s, we all now have access to each other's collection.
Well,
And
and
instead of having to physically hand it to that person and say, "Hey, here you go, like enjoy it," they now can at least enjoy it because one of us bought it and now we're able to play it together.
right. Well, and better yet, so like I don't know. So for local games, it looks like it's like if you're all in the same room, Switch 1 is able to work with that too. Because all the
Mm-hmm.
games they showed this off for were Switch 1 games, except for Mario Party Jamboree, it's using the Switch 2 edition of the game. So like one person would need to have the Switch 2 and whatever the software is, and then they can send it to those people in the room. At the same time, I think with some of those, then you start to get to the point of like, why wouldn't you just play on the TV? I think that's a fair critique of it. With the online, then yes, everyone needs to have the system, but then they can all still receive the games, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's going to be the bigger game changer, and I do kind of wish looking at this, I do wish Switch One could still receive games online. Like I get it because that's probably the scenario it's going to be used in more, and so they want to have that be a Switch 2 exclusive thing to get more of those consoles sold. But it just would have been nice if, especially since all these games, aside from Mario Party Jamboree being the Switch 2 edition, like all these other games are Switch 1 games. The other thing I think we need to think about with it too is how good is the sharing going to be, particularly for online? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is this like streaming the games to these people? Because we've already seen how poor, like, oh, I'm going to go on to Switch Online and play an NES game with a friend, and that hasn't always gone well. And both of you have the games downloaded to your system, so, it's
Mm-hmm.
something to think about. We have to see how some of these things work out in reality.
Yeah, and the final thought that I have when it comes to like the technical side of things is, and I didn't get to mention it earlier, is with like the upgrade packs for those Switch games that you can get. I assume, and I can't be sure on this until we actually get more info on it or if people start testing it out in a couple of months. If you get an upgrade pack to a Switch game, I assume you can still play the original on your original Switch if you decide to, right?
So, right. So here's how it works. They have it on the website here.
Okay.
So, how do you purchase Switch 2 edition? I guess I don't think they quite have an exact answer to that question, but I would think this is how it works. You can shop Switch 2 edition games at retailers that sell games at the My Nintendo store or on the eShop on your system. So if you have the physical version, it'll show the Switch 2 logo and additional information on the front of the packaging. If you look at the digital version, it has the Switch 2 edition in the game's title. And then it has on this section already, do you already own the game? If you already own the game in either physical or digital form, you can upgrade to the Switch 2 edition by purchasing the game's upgrade pack. So the upgrade only includes the upgrades and enhancements. So I guess in my brain, what that would mean is if I own um, Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom, and I am I have the cartridge, right?
Hmm.
I pop it into my Switch 2. It recognizes it. Oh, you have The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Then you can go on to the eShop and purchase the upgrade, and then now you've got the Switch 2 edition of the game. I guess what I'm wondering then is like if they're going to sell a physical copy, like let's say they're selling Super Mario Party Jamboree Switch 2 edition and it's got all that extra stuff, maybe that would be the thing. Like if I tried putting that in my Switch 1, then it would be like I can't do anything with this game. At the same time, I would probably just want to play it on Switch 2 at that point. But I agree for these games that are just like you already own it, you're just getting the upgrade. I can't see why suddenly that would mean the physical game would stop working. I guess if you because that's the thing is you can transfer your games from the original system to the new one. So I would think then if you transfer from Switch 1 to Switch 2, then maybe that would create a problem. I'm not sure. That's kind of unclear right now.
Yeah, I think this is going to be a wait and see thing on this. My assumption would be it's like we can get an upgrade pack for it so it's playable on the Switch too, but I don't think like it itself would be like, oh, this is now impacting. It's like because it's not like we're throwing something into the actual game cartridge itself.
No.
It's like I think it's just an addition for the Switch 2 to be able to read it better.
Right. I guess so yeah, I guess in that sense these are two different questions is if you get if if there are physical copies of Switch 2 games or physical copies of Switch 2 edition games, I would think that's only compatible on Switch 2. If you have a Switch 1 game, but then you purchase the upgrade pack should only download to your Switch 2, so you shouldn't have that issue, I would think. I think you could still play it on the original. And I'm sure there's like I can conceive of like there's definitely going to be a scenario where that needs to happen for someone. Uh but I guess I'm just thinking like if it's if it's like in my case and it's like, well, this is just my system and I'm not lending it out to anybody, I can't think of why that would need to happen, but I'm sure that like someone can give a justification as to why and they're probably right.
Okay, so moving on because we've already been going on an hour about it. This is a currently old man yells at cloud situation, at least on my end.
A little bit.
Um,
I think a little bit for both of us.
so we got to look at some of the stuff for the games as well during this presentation, and I'm going to lightning round some stuff that I think that, at least from our perspective, is probably the more important reveals, and
Hmm.
then maybe we can go into more personal picks that we were more excited to see.
Yep.
Let's start with the obvious one, Mario Kart World.
Oh my god, it looks so good.
I love the idea of an open world Mario Kart. Like, I'm very hype on it. I do think that it's an interesting take on it where it's like essentially one giant world where all the racetracks are basically connected with each other. That's cool. I like that. I'm gonna be excited to try that out when that comes out. The new Hyrule Warriors game, Age of Imprisonment, is an interesting choice. Like,
Yeah, I never got Age of Calamity. It never really interested me because I hadn't played Breath of the Wild. That one's not really a big deal to me, but I can totally see like I can see that being a big thing for some people. I wanted to elaborate a little bit more on Mario Kart World before we continued quick.
oh, sorry, sorry,
No, that's
sorry.
okay. 24 uh 24 character races. Awesome. It looks like there's a way to get like costumes during the race. I think that's really neat. I like
I
the
wish that
idea.
was more part of the customization and not just strictly on the race
Well, right.
situation. Because I
I
feel
saw
like,
them like changing mid race. So I don't know if that's going to end up being a mechanic. There's going to be a whole nother presentation on the game on April 17th. I don't think we need, or June 17th. I can't remember. Some 17th coming up here. I don't think we need to record about that, but I'm just saying it's out there. We'll get more details. I think the going between tracks, like in a Grand Prix, is cool. I love that knockout mode. I think that's going to
mm-hmm.
be great. I don't personally need the free roam, but who knows? I could start playing it and be like, oh yeah, this is really cool. Uh, Hyrule Warriors.
Yeah, that one for me is going to be an interest. So I played the original Hyrule Warriors. I think it was on the Wii U when I got it,
Mm-hmm.
and I genuinely like it. I like that one. I haven't played Age of Calamity yet. I've heard Age of Calamity is even better. So I'm holding out some hope that like Age of Imprisonment is at least kind of on par with Age of Calamity if like people really seem to love that one. Um, but I can't say that like I'm like gonna get it day one. But I'm like, if it's on sale cheap enough, then yeah, I'll get it because like I still have to get Age of Calamity and try that one out myself for Switch. But honestly, like I feel like a Dynasty Warriors type game is gonna do great on the Switch too. Then so
I think
seeing
it'll be
like
good.
those ones will be good.
I think it'll be good. My thing is just if I'm playing a Warriors game, I want more like the original or like the original Fire Emblem Warriors, where it's like this is a celebration of all the games and it's cheesy and tons of crossover with characters. I don't need the oh, it's connected to the plot of this one other game. That doesn't work as much for me.
mean, sure, I get that point of logic, but like, I think the thing is like they really want to elaborate on the whole idea of the Breath of the Wild and the Tears of the Kingdom series, and I think
Yeah.
that is part of the reason they're doing it as well as they have been with those games specifically. The first Hyrule Warriors is just kind of like it's a good like you know we're going through all of Zelda effectively, and it's kind of this hodgepodge. Like it's still fun in
Yeah.
its
Oh
own
yeah.
right.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna argue it. I there's not as much of a cohesion with it. Like yeah,
Hmm.
even the story just kind of like okay,
For
just.
sure. Yeah.
But with like Age of Calamity, and I'm gonna assume here as Age of Imprisonment, I think they're going to be very more tailored to build a story around it, and I think that's really good, especially since like they really know how to make like the story tie in with the type of gameplay that it is.
Hmm.
So I can definitely be on board with that one. You brought it up earlier, DK Bonanza.
I cannot believe I never thought it would actually happen. We're getting our second 3D Donkey Kong game after Donkey Kong 64. I think it's going to be real good. I'm not sure about because it seems like you're going underground and it seems like very open world. I'll have to see. I'll probably pick
You
it
are
up and
literally
enjoy it.
cracking open the world. Yes.
I know. I'll have to see how open it is because, like, if they at least give you a decent, like, if there are if there are missions like in Odyssey, I'll definitely be more on board for it. If it's like super duper open and it's like you got to figure it out, then I might be a little bit less inclined. But on the whole, that was like a highlight.
I'm sure it's going to be like a DK Odyssey situation, is the best way that I can call it. Like, I think it's going to be similar in that aspect. But I do think it's a interesting take. Also, to briefly touch on this, DK with pants.
I
Um,
know.
I don't know how, but I do love the overalls that he was wearing in the
Uh huh.
trailer. I'm just like, oh, I love this already. Oh, and before we go too far into it, the redesign. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's something that like needs to be brought up a little bit.
I'm torn on it. On the one hand, I'm not as into it. On the other hand, I'm also thinking like, okay, is this really a big deal for me? Like, am I gonna be like, I don't like the new Donkey Kong, so I don't really want to play it, you know?
See, I think there is a specific reason for the redesign, and it's because they're trying to make it more cohesive with the movie.
Yep.
Because when I looked at it, he looks very similar to how he did in the movie that released a few years ago. And I think that's a smart choice. Like, I'm not saying DK is going to be hyper realistic. I'm not saying he's got to be
No.
cartoonish or anything like that. But it's like having a relatable face for like kids who are going to be growing up with the Switch 2 more than
Hmm.
likely and seeing like, oh, that's Donkey Kong from the movie. Like, yeah, because for us, we were introduced to Donkey Kong as, you know, for me at least, a 2D sprite with
Yep.
like how many
Yep.
pixels?
For me, it was the
And
original
for
DKC.
Yep, and I was gonna actually bring that up. It's like for others, they were in more of that like '90s to 2010s version of it, and I think that DK will still always be iconic. And
Mm-hmm.
depending on circumstances, it's not like they're getting rid of the complete design. Um, but I do think that like the redesign is going to be good overall. I think some people, I swear to God, if I see anything of a DK gate or something like that online, I'm gonna be like, you need to absolutely grow up. But that's not the important thing here.
I
I
I
just
could
wanted to touch base on that.
I could see there because this is totally the kind of thing they would do. Kind of like how I don't know if this is spoilers if you haven't gotten this far, but in Super Mario Odyssey, there's or actually no, I think this might have been a download after or not like a download. They did like monthly. I can't remember how exactly they did it because they weren't updates. It was like monthly unlocks. It seemed like after the game came out, but one of them was a 3D version of the 8-bit Mario sprite for Mario and Odyssey. I could totally see them doing the same thing in this game where it's like, okay, we'll have a costume essentially that's the classic DK design that you like. So
Mm-hmm.
that might be the best of both worlds. I'm not saying it's happening. I'm just saying I could see them doing that. Did you notice
Yeah.
too? Actually, related to that, he's got a different voice too.
Yeah, I mean, it is expected. I mean, it's not like it's Seth Rogen doing it, but
Oh no,
I,
I'm just
I,
saying it like it stuck
I
out to me. Like that's not the Donkey Kong I know, but it's not bad.
oh, right. Yeah, I don't think that's inherently bad. I think this is one of those redesigns where it's like, my hope is that the public's going to be chill
Mm-hmm.
and not give as much of a crap about it. So I don't have any gripes with it whatsoever. It's like, it's DK. We know
Mm-hmm.
who DK is. Like, yes, is it slightly different than what we grew up with? Sure. Is it going to make me not like want the Switch 2? No,
Right.
because it's DK. Like, I don't mean that as like a dig at him. It's like I just don't think that it's not like they gave like Mario the original Sonic the Hedgehog movie treatment where he's way too hyper realistic and his teeth are absolutely concerning. It's like, no, he's just more cartoonish because now he kind of, I would argue he actually, DK actually fits a little bit more in the world of Mario now because of that
Sure.
redesign.
Yeah, I think so. It's not like with Mario. Have you ever seen that French commercial where Mario's in the like gangster hat and he's got like a tribal tattoo? This is on a Game Boy Advance commercial in Europe.
I can't say that I have, but
I'll have to send you an image of that after this, but it's like it's not like they suddenly up and changed Mario's design to be that. This is just like a different a new take on Donkey Kong. So I agree. It's not the end of the world as we know it.
all right, so I've got two more before I just kind of go into the more lightning round aspects that I wanted to touch on.
Okay.
Sakurai's new game with Air Riders.
My standard for like if a presentation is really good, and on the whole, I would probably give this one like 8.5. I could be persuaded to a 9. Um, for me, it's like how many things are there in it where it's like it makes me go like, oh my god, or I get like a chill, which I realize is very cringy to say, but that was the thing that did it. I was like, okay, Kirby. I was like, oh, Kirby Air Ride, and then I see like but there's so many things where I'm like, oh my god, that looks so much like a Sakurai kind of thing. And then I see they get to the end of it, and it's like the text director comes up, and it's like they would not highlight who the director is if it wasn't Masahiro Sakurai. And then I see it come up, I'm like, yes, he's back, he's doing Kirby.
Yeah, and I'm very happy to see him on his next project. So I will definitely be keeping an eye on Kirby Air Riders. I never actually played the original one from the GameCube, and it is still one of the few exclusive GameCube titles I have still not owned all these years later. But I will definitely be keeping an eye on Kirby Air Riders, so like when more info comes out, because I think that's going to be a fun one for a lot of people.
Great segue. Maybe it will come to Nintendo GameCube Classics on the Switch Online expansion pack.
That was literally the last thing that I was going to bring up before I got into like the more lightning round thing,
How
because like
apropos.
I literally looked at the announcement and I almost screamed like so giddy. Like GameCube is like for me like my console I grew up with for the longest time. Like I love the GameCube full stop. So the thing that I'm excited about is that there are certain games to see on that, like as it's either going to be early on or they're going to be a part of, like at the beginning, like Chibi Robo, for example,
That's
is a
big.
huge one. The Pokemon Coliseum and XD games, I am stoked about those ones. I cannot even begin to pretend like I am not going to get giddy when I boot those up for the first time.
I thought it was interesting. My only real problem with it right now, I don't normally get on this same train with people because I think they can get a little over the top with it, and I think they don't always respect some of the more obscure retro games. This service cannot launch with only 3 games though. Even if I give you that Wind Waker is not like a super short game, I mean, you need more than Wind Waker, Soul Calibur 2, and F-Zero GX.
Dude, that was the other one I was excited about was F-Zero GX, and that one will have online play. They said that's insane.
Okay, but not to let's just temper the expectations based on how previous services performed with online. Like it
Hang
could
on,
be
I gotta get
great,
this
it
out
could
of
be
my system.
terrible.
No, I'm stoked, Brandon. You cannot take this from me. Like,
Hey,
yes,
fair.
I understand the gripe of like we can't just have 3 GameCube games at launch, and realistically, I don't think that's an inherently bad situation. I think it is gonna. I think more of those games that they showed, like as the listings, I think are gonna be probably on that system sooner than I think they are letting on. So I don't think it's gonna be a complete like wash. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I guess if it comes out at launch, I think they might be a little bit more in tune with we gotta get games up for this more frequently, but like people already give them a hard time about like, oh, they only put up 1 game a month or whatever for this. And that I'm not fully in disagreement with them, but like kind of like I was saying, it's like they just put up the four big Koei strategy games for SNES online. And it's like those aren't my thing, but you can't deny that like Nobunaga's Ambition is an important SNES game. Like just because I won't play it, I can't be like, oh, it's not this other game that I really wanted, so therefore it's bad. I don't think that's fair. But I just, like I said, I would have really really tried hard to launch with more than 3 games. But
I
that's just
mean,
me.
the inevitable will happen at some point, but Melee will be on there, and everyone's gonna lose their collective minds.
We'll see. They never put Smash 64 up on Wii U, and they don't have Smash 64 up yet. So we'll see. I think it's possible, but again, I just want to.
I make the argument that they're going to save Smash 64 and Melee for the Switch 2 when that comes out because they're going to have people get so stoked about seeing that on a much more like higher resolution system at that point.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I
my two
agree.
cents and my that would be my assumption. I would not be surprised if they wait until Kirby Air Riders comes out to be like, oh, by the way, Melee's coming out. It's just to really hammer in the whole Sakurai win that.
Or they do Kirby Air Ride.
Right. Like, they will have probably Kirby Air Ride. Probably, I wouldn't be surprised when that launches.
Mm-hmm. All right. What other stuff stuck out to you specifically?
So, I'm. I don't want to say stoked. I'm more shocked that they have Elden Ring coming to this.
I kind of thought it was like, okay, this is obligatory. Like, I'm glad it's not a game I'm gonna pick up, but I agree. I was like, well, they got to do it, right?
Like, I will. I'm not gonna pick up Elden Ring. I already have it on PC, so like I don't need it on Switch 2. I will definitely keep an eye out just to kind of see how it runs. Because if Elden Ring of all things can run on a Switch 2 really like reliably, okay, Switch 2 is definitely going to be a much more powerful system. Now, I don't know how many companies are going to be pushing the system to its breaking point, But if Elden Ring can be coherent enough and like reliable enough on the Switch too, I think that's going to give us a better idea on that whole run.
If Elden Ring can be 4K 60 on the TV, that's pretty darn good. I mean, I'm not prepared to call it a Steam Deck killer with the prices we've got so far, but like, it's definitely more
I don't.
viable than a Steam Deck for more people.
Yeah, I don't think that there's inherently going to be a situation that's screaming like, "Oh, this is going to be the Steam Deck killer." I don't think it's ever going to be in that
Yeah, no,
front.
you're right. That's
Like,
that's unfair.
I think there are some games that I'm going to be impressed if they're running on the same level as the Steam Deck. Like they mentioned Split Fiction was on there. I think it's coming out when the system comes out if I remember right.
Yes, I'm pretty sure that's a launch title.
Yeah. I mean, it's been out for long enough now that like, when it comes out on the Switch too, cool. Like it'll be nice to have that. And honestly, that entire set of games with like It Takes Two, Brothers, A Way Out, Split Fiction, I think are perfect candidates for this sharing games situation we were
Yeah,
talking about
yeah, you're
because they
absolutely
are
right.
all legitimate co-op games like you have to be a part of. And I think that is a massive massive opportunity from them. I think that's just a smart move on their point. Um, so the other games that I mentioned that I was most excited about, Hades 2, very
I knew
excited
you
for
were going to
that.
say it.
Well, yeah, I still actually haven't played Hades 2 yet because my one buddy for Christmas was like, "Oh, I'm gonna buy you this on Steam." He is still not, so I am still waiting. But he did also mention he wanted to wait until the game fully came out to get it. So I'm like, okay, I get it. Like I'm not gonna hold it to it. I have enough games that I'm still trying to beat through right now as it is. Um, Enter the Gungeon 2 was a surprise. I'm very stoked about that one personally. Because I love the original, and it is interesting seeing that now in a more like 3D scope. So once more info is on that, I'll probably have more thoughts on it. But like the initial announcement definitely got me excited. Um, then kind of in like the little bit that they had with all those games kind of flashing past in like that montage thing that they had going. Silk Song finally coming out this year. Whether that's true or not, I think a lot of
We'll
people are going to
see.
be very excited. But like seeing that it has a year finally actually seems like a big deal now. So like it feels like it's much closer than it is. Now, does it mean that it will be at like December 31st of 2025? It could. I can't confirm that one way or the other, but it could. Um but no, I think having like an actual hard year for like the first time in like I don't know how long since that game got announced
Been a
is
while.
gonna be exciting.
Is that all you had, or are there any other ones
I
you want to
have
go
two
over?
more. I have two more.
All right.
The ones that I'm excited about, and these are more series that like I have actually got games in that I need to get more into. One was the new Professor Layton. When they announced that, I was actually pretty stoked
I'm
because I
so
started getting into
excited
those.
for that.
Like I'm very stoked to see that we have a new Layton game coming out appropriately, and I really hope that that one does well. And then there is one series that I have not actually gotten to start yet that I'm excited for. Is the new game for the AI, the Somnia Files. I forget how it's pronounced.
Oh yeah, yeah,
You
I
know what
saw
ones
it
I'm
in here
talking
too.
about.
Yes, the AI, the Somnium Files thing.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a very very good addition because I've heard the other two games because I think it was like Zero Time Dilemma was on the 3DS and everyone really enjoyed that one. And I forget what the other one is. There's two games out now, and then there's a second game, or I'm sorry, there's a third game that I'm spacing on what it is. Hang on, let me
I
see if I
didn't
can
think
find it.
those were. I didn't think those were related to Zero Escape. I thought they were different.
No, I think Zero Time Dilemma is one of them. I'm just trying to remember offhand what it is.
It looks
Hold on.
interesting either way. It's not. I'm not convinced yet that it's my thing, but I agree it could be good.
Yeah. So I think those are the big things. Now, and I didn't actually get to touch base on this before I completely dropped the floor to you. Um, Something that I wanted to mention that I had a thought of during the announcement of the GameCube stuff that they announced. I think that this is Nintendo testing the waters with certain franchises because it feels really specific that like some of the first games that they're giving for the GameCube um games for the library are Chibi Robo, F Zero GX, and Pokemon Coliseum and XD Gale of Darkness. My initial gut reaction is saying you would not pick these games specifically if you didn't have another reason to.
I would
And my thought is,
I would hedge on Chibi Robo and Pokemon Coliseum because we don't have dates for those. But I agree on F Zero GX between that and F Zero 99, and they just had on the music service that it was F Zero and F Zero X. Like,
yeah,
apparently F Zero is finally on their minds again. Is the impression I'm getting.
I hope to God we get an F Zero game soon. Because, like, F Zero GX, and I will put this out there, is single handedly one of the best racing games, period. And I do not say that
Yeah,
lightly. As someone who was very big in racing games a lot during, like, probably my high school and early college years. Like, Mario Kart is still, like, my all time favorite, more just for the silliness of it. But if you want, like, a challenge, F Zero is that. And, like, GX was so good for a GameCube title, no less. Like, it's got a fun story mode. It's a good challenging racer that lets you kind of like it lets you really take into consideration like you have to be on full awareness in those races because you need to make sure that you are knowing when to attack, when to just speed boost. Like there is almost a strategy element to it in some cases when you're like in that situation. And I absolutely adore that game. Like that's probably a top 10 GameCube title for me. So my hope is that when we see these and we're going to actually have like people see what these numbers are probably on Nintendo's end, they're going to look at them and say like what's the general, response to this? And if people are playing these games, it may have them be like, all right, they want a new F-Zero. All right, they want a new Chibi Robo game. I mean, something better than the, what was it, 3DS one that we got like a while ago that was not good.
I think
And
people
then
give that
I
one a
would
little
just,
too harsh a time. But yes, it's not like
I,
3D
I,
games in any
I
way.
didn't play it. I didn't play that one, so I
It
can't,
was
like,
fun.
I haven't even played Chibi Robo, but I definitely understand there will definitely be defenders on that one too. What I am hoping to God for is we get a trilogy effectively of like that Coliseum XD Gale of Darkness. Like I would love a third game with the Shadow Pokemon. And I'm not saying it would be in this sense, but maybe in a similar breath of Pokemon Legends? Maybe? Like
Maybe.
it's very plausible just with everything kind of being the scope of what it is. I mean, it was already semi open worldish to an extent with how they were doing it, but they just didn't have as much frequency with like what it is to like Legends and Scarlet and Violet and what will eventually be Legends EA. It's not saying it can't be done though, but like if they do, that is going to be a very big game. If it's what I would be predicting to come of it in my head. And I don't know if that would necessarily be the right choice. Because, like, Coliseum and XD both are very linear. So, having a more open world thing that talks about, like, Shadow Pokemon and all that stuff, I don't know if it's, like, the necessary mesh that it needs to be. Like, I would almost say, like, it could probably still be its own like more traditional style of Pokemon game. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, I could see that.
Yeah, like I'm not saying I'm not open to an open world Pokemon game that has like mass outbreaks of shadow Pokemon or something like that, which very well could be a thing. I don't know if that's necessarily the way to do it though, but like I definitely think that this GameCube library that they have picked specifically right now is definitely testing the waters to be like, are people actually caring about these games that we can warrant greenlighting a sequel or a revamp of a series?
I hope so. It'd be the smart thing to do. Um,
Like, you
okay.
can't keep dangling F-Zero in front of me.
I know. They
I'm
gotta do it eventually.
so I'm so angry every time when I see something dangling from an F-Zero. I'm like, you guys know it exists. Like,
Make the game.
it's like, because what was it? They had Mario Kart had the Blue Falcon added in for one of the games, and then they had F-Zero 99, and I'm just sitting here like, now we have GX on the GameCube library for the Switch Online service. I am losing my mind. You cannot keep doing this, Nintendo. Like, please, I will absolutely buy it day one if we get a F-Zero game that is even rivaling GX. Like,
That's a game you'll pay $90 for.
okay, because here's the thing: GX is still impressive, and it came out in like 2003. When was it? Hang on, I gotta have to. Okay, F-Zero GX release.
Did you ever play F-Zero X, the arcade game that pairs
No,
with
I'm
it?
getting it. I was gonna get into that. So F-Zero GX came out in 2003, 22 years ago. It still looks incredible on a GameCube than some modern racing games, and I'll die on that hill. Like, they did so much more intricate stuff with that game than they had any need to. Kind of like what you just brought up with like F-Zero AX, where you could actively take your GameCube memory card, stick it into the arcade machine, and it would give you unlocked racers from the cabinet that otherwise you would have to unlock via time trials. And I will
I
be
thought you had to beat the story mode chapters on very hard, which that
that
game
was
is already
maybe
hard
maybe that
enough.
was it. It's been a while since I played F Zero GX. I'll be honest, because so I don't remember exactly how it was that they were unlocked. I just remember only unlocking I think two of the nine racers that it was, and I couldn't tell you how that I unlocked them because like it's been so long. But I remembered unlocking Daigoro, which is Samurai Goro's son, which was a playable racer in AX. Um, I forget who the other one that I unlocked is. Hang on, let me see if I can find out who, because I'm sure it's gonna be one of those things where I'm gonna see the face and be like, oh yeah, that was the one that I unlocked.
I want whichever one is the taxi character. That one was the one that I thought was the most interesting.
Maybe it was the taxi character I unlocked. I do not remember offhand now. Let me see here. Was it maybe QQQ that I'm thinking of? I don't know. Because Daigoro was the one for sure that I remember unlocking. Because like I think he was like the youngest ones. So there were 10. There were 10 unlockable characters, sorry. But one of them you could only unlock after beating all the chapters on hard, and then everybody else you had to beat on very hard.
Which is a nigh impossible task, I might add.
I mean, get a second chance at it now if you really want to.
That game, oh my god, that game is so hard. Anyway, um, so the good thing here is there really wasn't much else now that I'm looking at it that I was like, oh man, I have to talk about this. So there's only really two extra things that I wanted to comment on. I thought the welcome tour thing was going to be cool. I was like, oh, this is going to be like the Astros playroom of this system. And then I saw you have to spend money on it. And I'm like, no, no. Now, okay, fine. If it's $5, like I talked about with the upgrade packs, that's not the end of the world, but it's just like that was set up right there. That should be a bundled in game. Oh,
Hmm.
I don't know why that was so hard. And then the other thing for me, because I don't know if this is a big deal for you, but this is a big deal, or at least a big-ish deal for me. There wasn't a ton that I thought was interesting with the Street Fighter 6 section, but then I saw Amiibo are still alive and well.
Hell yeah.
3 figures, 22 cards, and then randomly, I don't know why they wouldn't have included this in here because it seemed like it would have gone over perfectly fine when they were talking about the upgrade packs. They're making 4 more Amiibo figures for Tears of the Kingdom for the Switch 2 edition.
Yeah.
They're making I think they're called the Sages in that game, like the descendants of the champions, basically. So it's like, okay, uh, I'm just glad to know that it's like this ride is not completely over. Otherwise, yeah, when I look at most of these games here, it's like they're cool, like I'm happy. Split Fiction was one that I saw. I was like, okay, that could be interesting to me. Um, I think it's huge that they're getting Final Fantasy VII remake on there. I think that's a big deal. I was surprised they didn't just say like, "Hey, we're gonna have remake and we're gonna have rebirth at the same time." That just seems like it would make sense to me. I
Hmm.
think it's cool to see like Hogwarts Legacy and Civ 7 are going to use the mouse controls, so we're seeing at least some third party devs start to pick up on that too. Uh, yeah, beyond that, I mean, there wasn't a ton. Fast Fusion, I think that'll be good. That's like F Zero. Apparently, Arcade Archives is going into Arcade Archives 2, so I guess they're in a sequel series now. They're starting, it looks like, with Ridge Racer, so maybe they just needed to upgrade the engine for more complex games. I agree with you on Professor Layton. I think that's most of it. The only other tiny thing we didn't touch on, because they really kept this hidden, at the very bottom of the listings of all the games here, they have this little section on game key cards. Did you hear about this?
No, I have not.
Okay, so game key cards are another thing. I'm kind of torn on it because I saw some people with it. They were like, this is making these games where you have to download them from the box worse. And I'm like, I guess I don't. I'd need to see it in practice to make sure for sure how I feel about this, but um the way it works, so these game key cards, it says they're different from regular game cards because they don't contain the full game data. Instead, the game key card is your key to downloading the full game to your system via the internet. After it's downloaded, you can play the game by inserting the game key card into your system and starting it up like a standard physical game card. So, I guess the way I'm reading it is it's basically like those games that you see out there now that are just a code in a box, but you're at least getting the trinket of the actual cartridge, which I think
Hmm.
I think that's neat. I do think it's kind of a silly limitation to be like, oh, in order to play this download game, this game that you downloaded, but you bought the key card version of, you need to actually put the card, like the game, into your system, even though it's downloaded to your console.
It's a very questionable choice on that one, I feel like.
It's a very Nintendo decision. Like I said, I like at least getting the trinket. I like that you have to use it like a physical game, but why not just write the game to the cartridge then?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel that. All right, I think we got to wrap this up soon since we're pushing another 2 hour episode.
Yes, we are. No, I think we've got this is basically it here. So
I think we need to appropriately title this one the Nintendo Switch 2 hour discussion.
well, we have to get to 2 hours. I don't think we're going to quite get there because I'm pretty sure we're very close to wrap up. Um, folks, I hope this didn't sound completely horrible on my end. Obviously, I'm traveling, I'm using a different mic, and I'm going to very lightly edit this because I want this to come out very quickly. So if there's any like noises or weird things you've heard in this that you wouldn't normally hear in an episode,
Yeah,
please
like my
bear with
dog
us.
barking in the back right now that I can hear.
Right, like your dog. I just had the headphone unplugged from the computer, so you were talking through the speakers a little bit. I hope I didn't catch it on the mic, but we'll see.
Whoops.
That's probably something I'll cut out of my track. But yeah, I think we summarized it very well at the very start of this, which is like a lot of positives, but the negatives are just like, I don't know. They're not overwhelming. They're just like they're major sticking points.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this is going to come down to a wait and see mentality just to kind of see how everything shakes out, at least initially. So for now, I think cautious optimism is probably the best case for a lot of us.
I'm not on board with the people who are immediately like, F this sucks, blah, 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 blah. I can see where they're coming from, but it's just like, God, you gotta get out of your feels. Like, you can be mad about it, but be like a little more reasonable mad about it, you know?
Right, I definitely agree with that one.
And like we talked about at the start, I think a lot of the problems, ironically, are more like longer term political problems than anything that's inherently wrong with this. And as much as I agree with them where they're coming from, it's like, unfortunately, being mad about this, I don't think is going to actually fix that issue. Even if I agree that the issue itself is still bad, like it's really not the overriding issue here.
No, I fully agree on that one. Um,
But yeah, we'll see how things shake out in June. My guess for me is I usually get a little extra spending money sent to me around my birthday in August, so if we get a bonus from work and I get a couple $100 sent to me, I suspect that I will be out purchasing a Nintendo Switch 2 on my birthday with a copy of Mario Kart World.
I am probably gonna see if I can get at least a couple of games when I buy mine, but I don't know when that will be. Like it's right on my birthday when it releases, but I don't know if I'm gonna actively get it day one. Like I'm tempted, don't get me wrong, but I do want to kind of see like part of me really wants to get it day one just to see if Scarlet and Violet play better on it. Because if they do, that will be insane.
I only think it would if it gets one of these upgrade packs.
Right, I agree. And if they do get that, amazing. If they don't, well, then it's doomed to be that whole situation. But that's not the point I'm gonna end on here.
I
I
don't think they'll let
think,
that sit on the table. I bet they would do something like that. But we'll see.
yeah, I'm telling you, you can find a way to make it improved. Like Switch's redheaded stepchild here is probably going to slowly become like one of the greater Pokemon games then because of it. Like I won't say that it 100% is going to fix everything. I don't think that's the case, but it will be interesting to see it in that whole circumstance for sure. But we'll see where it gets in.
All right. Yep. I think that's kind of the message out of this is wait and see. But if you had any thoughts on this episode, folks, those of you who have been listening to all hour plus of this, first off, thank you. Second off, please leave a like if you enjoyed it. Please comment if that's something you want to do. Actually, here's a fun fact. So on the version for so like this is on Spotify for podcasters, and one of the features that you can do on Spotify, additionally, is you can release polls. Our last episode got an answer to the poll, which is I think the first time that's happened. I asked people how many systems do you go for in a generation. We got one vote, one console. So 100% of the vote currently says people go for one console. So congratulations to that person. So yeah, if you're going to vote in that, if you're going to vote in a poll, vote in a poll if I put one up here. If you want to leave a voice message, that is at speakpipe.com/endless conversation loop. In fact, I don't think we mentioned the name Endless Conversation Loop until now. Look at us go. We're so
Well,
attentive.
we were kind of on a time crunch to get this done as soon as we could, so.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for listening in, and I think we are ready to sign out. This is Brandon.
There's a boom.
And we are in wait and see mode. Thank you for listening.
Bye bye.